Welcome to the Tertio Millennio Institute podcast. In the latest episode, we will consider what Catholic social teaching is, its main assumptions and goals. My name is Maria Ciostek, and my guest is Professor George Weigel, Distinguished Senior Fellow of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, biographer of John Paul II, founder and president of Tertio Millennio Seminar on the Free Society, and author of numerous books analyzing further challenges facing the modern church. Professor, welcome.
Thank you, Maria. Good to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. Professor, for more than 30 years, you've been running Tertio Millennio Seminar on the Free Society, an annual summer school to which you invite people from Central Europe and the US to explore Catholic social teaching. So the first question is, what is Catholic social teaching? What does it mean generally? What does it mean to you?
Catholic social teaching is a distinctive way of thinking about political life, economic life, cultural life, social life as a whole through the prism of Catholic faith. Catholic social teaching is not a political program. It's not a set of policy prescriptions. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking in which politics, culture, economics, society fit together into a coherent whole, each of the parts influencing the other. It's a way of thinking about politics, culture, economics, and society that begins with a distinctive view of the human person, of who each one of us is and what we can be. Catholic social teaching insists on the basis of both reason, what we can know by our intellectual capacities as human beings, and revelation, what God has told us through the people of Israel and in the incarnate Son of God, the Lord Jesus Christ, about who we are. We are people with a built-in dignity, reflected in our capacity to think and to choose wisely. What do I mean by thinking and choosing wisely? I mean thinking and choosing in such a way that our own lives are ennobled and fulfilled. A way of thinking and choosing wisely in which not only my life is ennobled and fulfilled, that ennoblement and fulfillment contributes to the good of society, because I'm connected to everybody else in one way or another. So we begin in Catholic social teaching with the, to use the technical term, inalienable dignity and value of every human person. Modern political terms, we call this human rights. But these are not rights bestowed by government. They're built-in expressions of human dignity and capacity. Why is this different? It's different in several ways. One is that it is a coherent whole in which the parts fit together. We live in a culture in which incoherence is a hallmark of our lives. Bits of politics here, bits of culture there, bits of economics someplace else. And it's hard to put all this together. It's also different because it seeks to be a way of thinking that's available to everybody. Lots of life in the democratic world today, in the Western world, whether we're in Central and Eastern Europe or North America, public life is lived in silos. People live inside their own little silo, like different forms of grain on a farm. Catholic social teaching by its appeal to reason, to the things we can know by reason, is genuinely not just ecumenical, but universal. It's a proposal for thinking about society, culture, politics, and economics that you can hear and engage with even if you're not a Catholic. Catholic social teaching does not require you to believe in a Trinitarian God or an incarnate Savior or the Immaculate Conception of the Savior's mother in order to hear and engage what it has to say. So in a siloed world of people just talking to their own kind, this is an important contribution to knitting society back together. So those are some things that I think about when I think about what is Catholic social teaching.
But you said that you do not have to be Catholic. You do not have to believe to engage into the Catholic social teaching. But yet, on the other hand, you said that the revelation is one of the main sources of it. So how to combine those two ideas? Because I can imagine that a lot of, let's say, economical ideas could be accepted by somebody who's not a believer, right? If we are talking about the taxes or something else, it's easy to find a common ground sometimes. But if we constantly look for the solution that also takes the revelation as the source, then we can find the difficulties to talk to other people who are not believers.
It's hard for me to imagine anything that would be only revelation-based in the social teaching of the Catholic Church. I mean, we all let's step back a minute and say what Catholic social teaching does not do. Catholic social teaching cannot tell you whether a presidential system or a parliamentary system is a better form of government. Catholic social teaching can't tell you that a bicameral legislature, an upper house and a lower house, a Senate and a House of Representatives, is better than just a unicameral legislature. Catholic social teaching can't tell you what a good tax rate is. It can tell you, based on reason, that if we are enjoying the benefits of society, we have an obligation to contribute to the provision of those benefits through paying taxes. But that's a judgment of reason. Take the most controversial aspect of Catholic social teaching, which is its teaching on the inalienable dignity and value of life from conception until natural death. A lot of people say Catholic opposition to abortion, Catholic pro-life positions are sectarian. This is some weird Catholic mumbo-jumbo that other people can't really understand. Well, actually, that's not true. The Catholic affirmation of the right to life of the unborn is based on two claims that anybody can judge on the basis of reason. One is a scientific claim. The product of human conception is a human being. It's not a dog, it's not a cat, it's not a goldfish, it's not any other form of creature. It's a human being, and it is that from the beginning, because modern biology, genetics, embryology tells us that the whole package is there in vitro from the beginning, and that this distinctively human creature in a very, very small form has the capacity internally directed to develop over time till it becomes someone with gray hair and an arthritic knee like me. That's the first claim from reason. It's scientific reason. And the second is is a claim in political theory, namely that a just state protects the lives of innocent human beings, that innocent human beings deserve the protections of the law in a just state. That's all you need to wrap your mind around in order to get the social teaching of the Catholic Church at that end of the life spectrum. Now, if you believe that every human being is, to use a metaphor, an idea in the mind of God, that each of us has a unique character and vocation. There's something that God intends for each of us that's quite unique to each of us. That is going to help you grasp the importance of that, of the scientific evidence and the rational claim about a just society, especially in difficult circumstances. But you don't need that to get to the position. It helps you understand and cherish the truth that you come to by reason, because rational conclusions can be a little cold and emotionally unsatisfying. But you don't need it to get there. So I think I would say the truths we know from Revelation in Catholic social doctrine help support and deepen our understanding of the truths we know by reason. But we can get to those truths by reason without appealing to Revelation. When at the very beginning of Catholic social doctrine, Pope Leo XIII teaches that industrial workers have a built-in human right to a just wage, capable of supporting a family. You can make a completely rational argument about that without believing that Jesus of Nazareth is the incarnate Son of God who was crucified, died, and risen for our salvation. A lot of people got to that point without the creed, without the confession of faith that we make every Sunday. And that's true throughout the social doctrine. I mean, one of the great principles of the Catholic social doctrine is this thing called subsidiarity, fancy word that essentially means there are multiple layers of authority in society, and they shouldn't get in each other's way, but rather should work together to build a society in which everyone flourishes, in which there is solidarity among people. For example, you don't ask the local fire department to take care of national defense. By the same token, you don't ask the National Defense Ministry to take care of crime in your neighborhood. I mean, there are different levels of authority in a properly ordered society. And you can get to that understanding by reason. You can get to the understanding that parents have a primary responsibility for the education of their children, as well as a duty to see to that education, without knowing anything about the New Testament. You can get to the idea that the state is not competent in all spheres of life, that a properly ordered state is a limited state, simply by looking at history. Look at the history of the Soviet Union, in which, particularly take the Soviet Union under Stalin, a truly totalitarian state in which there was only the individual and the state. That was not a very nice place to live. And you can get to that understanding by reason. So that's how I think about the relationship of reason and revelation.
Of course, but on the other hand, our main goal is to take the side of the reason. Then maybe why to add the Catholic part? What's the difference between the Catholic social teaching than any other social teaching, actually?
I think Catholic social teaching is more flexible, has a more textured understanding of the relationship of culture, society, political community, and economy. I think Catholic social teaching, for example, reaches what we call the principle of solidarity, civic friendship. You need more than legal relationships to have a justly ordered society. You can get there by reason, but you can also get there by a Christian understanding of the fact that, as the English Anglican priest and poet put it, John Donne, no man is an island. Each of us is part of a whole. Now, he wrote that as a piece of English poetry, but it was clearly influenced by his Christian understanding. So it's a question of the richness of a view of society, a textured view of society, and one with deep philosophical roots. I mean, I don't know. I mean, utilitarianism goes back to John Stuart Mill. Catholic social doctrine goes back, in some respects, reaches back to Aristotle. I mean, the roots, the intellectual roots, are deeper and therefore presumably a bit stronger.
That's true. And how do you think? Because we live now in the, as you said, in those very separate words, one from another, right? And does the world needs the Catholic social doctrine? Because maybe people who are not believers, they do not really care about, I don't know, economics or politics. They just live day-to-day stuff and they don't really care. Maybe they have no need for something like this. Well, especially if there are atheists.
Everyone is living out of an implicit view of how the world is and ought to be. You can say you're not thinking about these things, but in fact you're behaving in such a way in your activities as a citizen, as a consumer, as a parent, as a member of a culture that expresses an implicit worldview. So the question is whether that worldview is actually conducive to producing or inspiring people to be happy and fulfilled, to live in solidarity with others, or whether it's locks you up in another silo. See, my claim would be that let me rephrase that. And this takes us back to faith and reason again, a revelation and reason. Look at the human rights resistance in Central and Eastern Europe in the 1980s. You had solidarity in Poland, which was composed of both people of faith and people of no faith. One of the greatest political essays written in the 20th century on what it means to resist the communist culture of the lie was written by Václav Havel, The Power of the Powerless, an essay from that era. Havel had a bit of a Catholic background. He certainly was not a Catholic thinker in any sense of the term. These people all managed to work together because the worldviews, if you will, the narratives, to use that awful word, that they lived within overlapped, were coherent with each other, were not contradictory of each other. And that made possible coalitions of people who, to use Havel's term, wish to live in the truth. Coalitions of intellectuals and workers, believers and non-believers, people on the right, people on the left politically, committed to living in the truth made possible the nonviolent collapse of communism in this part of the world. That's a very powerful example of how worldviews, casts of mind, and moral commitments can reinforce each other, even if the fundamental beliefs about God are not aligned among people.
And you mentioned the idea of the truth. I understand it's very, very, very important, the basic one in the Catholic social teaching, that Catholic social teaching believes that there is one truth that has to be shown to the world and we have to live by it. Don't you think that this is a little bit controversial now, when we can hear so often that everybody has his own truth and there is no such thing as truth, how to look, what is real, what is not, etc.?
Well, I think people who say there's only your truth and my truth, but nothing called the truth, are simply fooling themselves. A friend of mine who is a philosopher once said, if you really think that there are no absolute moral truths, light a cigar in the no smoking section of a restaurant. and you will quickly find out that there are moral absolutes, and people know them. The question is that the problem is that we don't know how to account for the moral truths we intuitively know. And that's where the social teaching of the Church, as well as Catholic moral theology, can help. There's another problem with this your truth, my truth business that I think we're seeing all over the Western world today. And it's a real threat to democracy. If there's only Maria's truth and George's truth, and neither Maria nor George recognizes something called the truth, what happens when Maria's truth collides with George's truth? It comes into conflict with George's truth. Well, there's no, what would you call it, no horizon against which we can settle the difference, whose truth is true. So where do we end up? Well, Maria imposes her power on George, usually by bringing in the state to bludgeon George into what Maria thinks is the proper behavior. Or I do the same to you. I bludgeon you, I exert my power on you. This is a kind of Nietzschean view of the world. It's very dangerous. It's the antithesis of a genuine democracy. And it's what then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger in 2005, later Pope Benedict XVI, called the dictatorship of relativism. If the moral logic or moral theory dominating a society is that there are no truths, then the only thing left is power and will, and the exertion of will through power. And you can't have a democracy that way. You just can't. I mean, it ends up self-destructing. So as much as people want to fool themselves into thinking that one can live, or society can function indefinitely without any fundamental agreements on what is true and what is false, what is noble and what is base, what is life-affirming, what is lethal, that's just not going to work over time, and it can get very ugly, as indeed it has gotten ugly in many parts of the developed world.
Yes, isn't this relativism the reason for which we have such a very, very deep divisions now in the society? I think we can see it in US, but also in Poland. It's not something...
It's one of the reasons. I think there are fundamentally different views of what makes for human happiness, what makes for social solidarity. I think one of the fundamental dividing points in this confused Western world today has to do with the nature of freedom. Now, we can illustrate this by a popular song. Frank Sinatra, "I Did It My Way." Okay, is that an adequate understanding of freedom? That, I do things my way because I want to do them that way. I don't think it is. I think it's actually a very childish understanding of freedom. I have a 4-year-old grandson who loves to bang on a keyboard. He thinks that's really fun stuff, to get an electronic keyboard and bang on it. Now, sure, he's having fun, but he's not making music. Okay? In order to be able to create or perform music on a keyboard, you have to learn how to do it. You have to do certain, what I remember as excruciatingly boring exercises when I was learning to play the piano. I've often said to groups in explaining this that the first book I've ever wanted to burn was a book of piano exercises called Scales, Chords, and Arpeggios. Universally detested throughout the world. But once you learn those things and learn how to read music, which is another form of discipline, it's a language, then you're not limited to noise making. You can make something beautiful. You can make something that's an expression of the best within you rather than just kind of this childish instinct to make noise. Same thing applies to language. All of us learn a first language by listening, speaking, and making a lot of mistakes. That's not a bad way to learn a second, third, or fourth language either, but at some point in the process, you have to learn grammar and vocabulary. Grammar and vocabulary are rules. They are rules that allow you to turn vocal noise making into speech. They're rules that allow real communication between people to go on, not just exchanges of noise. Freedom, if it's truly human, in its capacity to create beauty, in its capacity to create communication, always operates within rules. So the notion that freedom is simply I did it my way just doesn't cohere with reality. Reality doesn't work that way. But unfortunately, over the past 50 or 60 years, this notion of freedom as willfulness, I did it my way, has become widespread throughout the Western world. And this is creating a lot of problems. And I would also say, Maria, it's creating or contributing to a lot of unhappiness. I mean, Western societies have loosened the rules, whether it's on marriage and divorce or all sorts of other relationships, loosened the rules on education. I mean, in countries with so-called liberal abortion laws, loosen the rules on who lives and who dies. Same thing with euthanasia. Do we note a dramatic increase in human happiness over the past 50 or 60 years? I don't think so. I mean, the statistics on mental health problems in the Western world, particularly among young people today, are pretty appalling. none of us really wants to live in a completely rule-free environment.
But there is a paradox, because we all fought as a society for the very, very long time that the rules are the thing that is making us unhappy.
May well be the case that, certainly rules in which people were discriminated against because of their ethnicity or their race or their sex were problematic. But no society can function without a set of rules. The question is whether those rules, laws, are just and contribute to the flourishing of individuals and the solidarity of society. Now, one of the things we really should note is that in this rule-free society, people are not living in solidarity more than they did before. Quite the opposite is the case. But to get back to where we began this part of our conversation, I think this, the deep divisions we see in the Western world today really come down to quite dramatically different visions, narratives about what makes for human happiness, what is freedom, and how we live together in a way in which both the individual and the society flourish at the same time.
And that brings us to another problem, because how can we combine those two things? Because it's easy to say that we should live in solidarity with other people, and this is a very good concept in Poland and very well understood. But on the other hand, we cannot pretend that the solidarity doesn't need us to get rid of some of our comforts, some of our needs, some of our just things that we want, etc. So how is the individual can live with the idea that for the solidarity he has to, make a sacrifice? This is also not a very popular view today.
Yeah, but people may object to this in the abstract, but they do it all the time. They make sacrifices all the time in their own individual lives. If you're going to get an extensive higher education, you are sacrificing years in which you could be making lots of money. If you want children and want to have a family, you are inevitably sacrificing certain freedom and amount of freedom and liberty to lead your own life, because there's this little person who needs you and for whom you're responsible. No marriage can survive for very long without the spouses making sacrifices of their own will for each other. On everything from, where are we going on vacation, to what are we having for dinner tonight, to the number of children we propose to bring into the world, how we're going to educate them. Marriage is an ongoing negotiation. And if you don't understand that, you're not going to get very far. And at some point, in the negotiation, each party has to back off a little bit, or it's not going to work terribly well. So I think we understand the imperative of not living as if as if I am the only person in the world and everybody has to conform themselves to me. We understand that, and we live it, to one degree or another. The problem comes at an abstract level when you try to explain, okay, How does that work? What are the boundaries of appropriate sacrifice of my will and desires, et cetera, et cetera? And I don't, there's never going to be a universal answer to that. That's going to work out differently in different places. But the principles of the social teaching of the church, social doctrine of the Catholic Church, have a kind of universal applicability. Whether you're a new democracy or an old democracy or a middle-aged democracy, this vision of integral human society in which politics, culture, economics, and all work together to produce a society that's really fit for human beings. This has an applicability every bit as much in Nigeria today as it does in Poland.
So politics, culture, economics all together. You said at the beginning of our conversation that it doesn't mean that Catholic social doctrine is trying to get involved into politics. But why not? Maybe that would be a good idea to get involved. Maybe that would give more and more chances to actually make some changes in the society.
Every time the church has gotten involved in politics in the narrow sense of the term, seeking and exercising political power, the church generally makes a mess of things for itself, and it tends to make a mess of politics too. Just look at this from the point of view of somebody who cares about the vitality of the Catholic Church. Look at it from that angle. There are several places in the world where there has been a dramatic collapse of Catholic vitality over the past half century. Quebec in Canada, Ireland, Spain, and Portugal. In each of those instances, the church was deeply involved in nitty-gritty politics at the granular level and was deeply involved with either a particular political party or was a church established in law by the state. I mean, the modern track record of church-state entanglement is very bad for the church, and it doesn't seem to do too well for the state either. The way the church involves itself in politics, and by the church we have to talk about everybody. We're not just talking about bishops. Okay? The church's role is to form the people who can shape the culture that makes democratic politics possible, which means people who understand what you can compromise on and what you can't, people who know how to make an argument that other people can hear, people who do not regard those with different political views as mortal enemies or threats to the future of the country, people who can make the machinery of democracy work. That's the church's fundamental role, is at the culture forming level. Now, that's not the church's only role. In the United States, the Catholic Church since 1972 was deeply involved in the defense of unborn human life, publicly, and was constantly calling for legal protection for the unborn. The church did that, both the official church, the official spokesman for the church, people were authorized to speak for the church, the bishops, and I think a lot of individual Catholics did that in just the way I described a moment ago. They didn't say, we're Catholics, this is what we want, give it to us. they said, here's the scientific evidence, here's what a just society requires, you need to think about that, and here's what a proper legal solution to this question would look like. That made a real difference over a period of more than 50 years. And now we have a different kind of argument going on in the United States over the past year. But it's really not the business of the church, I don't think. Other people would disagree with this, but I don't think it's the business of the official church to say, this particular law is better than that particular law, as long as both are attempting to provide protection for innocents, whether they be unborn innocents or poor innocents or disabled people or whatever. We're not in the legislative business. We are in the business as a religious community of saying, here's what we think, to go back to where we started, on the basis of both reason and revelation, makes for good lives and good societies, and what do you, can you hear that, and can we talk about that? Situation, I think, in Poland is different. There's a long history here of the entanglement of Polish bishops with political parties. This goes back to the 1920s, the Second Polish Republic. I think this is a bad idea. It's irrespective of whatever political party you're identifying with. The church is above political parties. It should be trying to shape the cast of mind, the convictions, the approach to governance of the people who constitute those parties and who then legislate in your parliament or whatever. But it shouldn't be a partner of political parties. That's not what the church is, and it shouldn't be what the church does. In part because no political party of which I'm aware has ever really embodied the full range of ideas that go to make up Catholic social doctrine. In the U.S. today, Catholic Church's a Catholic point of view is very much aligned with the Republican Party on some questions and aligned with the Democratic Party on other questions. Now, does that mean we should form a Catholic party? No, I don't think so. First of all, it wouldn't work. Secondly, I just don't think the church is for